Born in a small log cabin, Lincoln teaches himself to read, becomes a lawyer, and rises to the presidency. His courage during the Civil War and his fight to end slavery become the core of American history. Born in a small log cabin, Lincoln teaches himself to read, becomes a lawyer, and rises to the presidency. His journey from humble beginnings to the highest office in the land is a testament to the power of will, intelligence, and an unwavering moral compass. He entered a world of immense hardship. Born on February 12, 1809, in a one-room cabin in Sinking Spring Farm near Hodgenville, Kentucky. His parents, Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln, were uneducated farmers, living a life defined by the rigorous demands of the frontier. Young Abraham's early years were marked by loss and labor. His mother passed away when he was only 9, a devastating blow that left an indelible mark on his young psyche. His father soon remarried Sarah Bush Johnston, a kind and supportive stepmother who recognized the boy's sharp intellect and unquenchable thirst for knowledge. She encouraged his reading, a habit that would become the foundation of his entire life. Formal schooling was a luxury rarely afforded on the frontier. In total, Lincoln received less than a year of structured education. Yet, his mind was a fertile ground for learning. He devoured any book he could get his hands on. The Family Bible, The Pilgrim's Progress, Aesop's Fables, and Parson Weems's Life of Washington. He would walk 4 miles to borrow a book, reading late into the night by the dim light of the fireplace. He filled slates and boards with his thoughts, practicing arithmetic and copying passages to improve his penmanship and understanding. This relentless self-education was not merely an academic exercise. It was the forging of a mind capable of deep, logical reasoning and profound empathy. He learned to analyze arguments, to see issues from multiple perspectives, and to articulate his thoughts with clarity and precision. The stories he read fired his imagination and shaped his moral worldview, instilling in him a deep respect for the principles of liberty and justice that he would one day be called upon to defend. As a young man, he worked a variety of jobs to support his family, from splitting rails to clerking in a general store in New Salem, Illinois. It was here that his character truly began to shine, earning him the nickname Honest Abe for his integrity and fairness. His ambition, however, stretched far beyond the confines of a small town. Lincoln's sharp mind and growing reputation for honesty drew him toward the law, a profession he saw as a path to public service and a means to shape society. Without the benefit of a formal law school, he embarked on another rigorous course of self. He borrowed legal texts, studying Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England with the same intensity he had once applied to literary classics. He was admitted to the Illinois bar in 1836, launching a successful legal career that would span over 2 decades. As a circuit-riding lawyer, he traveled across the vast prairies of Illinois, arguing cases that ranged from simple property disputes to complex criminal trials. This work brought him into contact with people from all walks of life, honing his understanding of human nature and strengthening his skills as a debater and orator. He learned to connect with juries and common folk, using homespun analogies and clear, logical arguments to make his case. His legal practice was not just a job. It was a crucible that prepared him for the political battles that lay ahead, sharpening his intellect and solidifying his commitment to the rule of law. Simultaneously, Lincoln was building a political career. He served 4 terms in the Illinois state legislature and 1 term in the U.S. House of Representatives. It was during this time that the issue of slavery began to dominate the national conversation, and Lincoln found his true calling. He was morally opposed to the institution, viewing it as a monstrous injustice that contradicted the nation's founding principle that all men are created equal. However, his initial political approach was moderate. He believed in containing slavery's spread, hoping it would eventually die a natural death. But the political landscape was shifting rapidly. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which allowed new territories to decide the issue of slavery for themselves, shattered the fragile national compromise and reignited Lincoln's political passions. He joined the newly formed Republican Party, which was founded on the principle of opposing the expansion of slavery. His powerful speeches against the institution began to gain him national attention. The turning point came in 1858 during his campaign for the U.S. Senate against the incumbent, Stephen A. Douglas. Though he lost the election, their series of 7 debates became legendary. In these debates, Lincoln articulated his moral and political arguments against slavery with breathtaking force and clarity, famously declaring that a house divided against itself cannot stand. His performance elevated him to the status of a leading national figure in the anti-slavery movement. 2 years later, the Republican Party nominated him for president. In a fractured four-way race, Lincoln won the presidency in November 1860 without carrying a single Southern state. His election was the final catalyst for secession. Before he even took the oath of office, 7 Southern states had declared their departure from the Union, and the nation stood on the brink of civil war. His courage during the Civil War and his fight to end slavery become the core of American history. The conflict that erupted in April 1861 at Fort Sumter was the greatest crisis the United States had ever faced. As president, Lincoln was now commander-in-chief of a nation tearing itself apart. The early years of the war were a relentless series of disappointments for the Union. Lincoln struggled to find effective military leadership, cycling through a succession of cautious and often incompetent generals. He faced immense pressure from all sides, from radical Republicans demanding immediate abolition, from Democrats calling for a negotiated peace, and from a public growing weary of the horrific bloodshed and staggering cost of the war. Through it all, Lincoln's resolve never wavered. He dedicated himself to the singular goal of preserving the Union, believing that the failure of the American experiment in democracy would be a tragedy for all of humanity. He was a hands-on leader, spending countless hours in the War Department telegraph office, reading dispatches from the front lines and issuing direct orders to his commanders. He studied military strategy, becoming a surprisingly adept strategist himself. He managed his fractious cabinet with political skill, balancing competing egos and ideologies to maintain a unified war effort. His leadership was defined by a remarkable combination of steely determination and profound humanity. He visited hospitals, comforted wounded soldiers, and wrote countless letters to grieving families, sharing in the immense sorrow that had enveloped the nation. As the war progressed, Lincoln's personal and political views on slavery evolved. What began as a war to preserve the Union transformed into a revolutionary struggle for freedom. He came to believe that the Union could not be truly restored without eradicating the institution that had caused its rupture. He understood that slavery was not just a political issue, but a moral cancer at the heart of the nation. This conviction led to his most consequential act, the Emancipation Proclamation, issued in 2 parts. The final proclamation, on January 1st, 1863, declared that all enslaved people in the rebellious states shall be thenceforward, and forever free. It was a monumental step, a daring wartime measure that redefined the purpose of the conflict. It transformed the Union Army into an army of liberation, and authorized the enlistment of African American soldiers, who would go on to fight with immense bravery for their own freedom. The proclamation was not a complete abolition of slavery, as it did not apply to the border states that had remained in the Union, but its symbolic and practical power was immeasurable. It committed the nation to the path of abolition and was the crucial precursor to the 13th Amendment, which would permanently abolish slavery throughout the United States. Lincoln's fight to end slavery was the moral centerpiece of his presidency, a fight he pursued with unwavering conviction against immense opposition. It was the fulfillment of the promise of the Declaration of Independence and a pivotal step toward a new birth of freedom. His leadership during this period was not just about winning a war. It was about reimagining and reconstructing the very soul of the American nation.